And I'll give you an example. When I ran for office one time, I had a volunteer who loved doorbelling my opponent's supporters' homes. That's actually who he wanted to go. If my opponent had if somebody out there had a sign up for my opponent, that's the house he wanted to go to. He grew up in Detroit, had a really interesting demeanor about him, and I appreciated it, having lived in New York City for a while. So I thought, perfect, here's a little handout. And his goal was to convince everybody that had my opponent's sign in the front yard to take it down. And he was successful 50% of the time. And it was funny because you know that every person's house he went to, no matter whether they took the sign down or not, they called that guy's campaign and said, "You wouldn't believe this, the guy that came and showed them the house." It caused great disruption. He loved it. This volunteer, if I had assigned him to do something else, would have been demoralized, he would have been, going through the motions, but he wouldn't have enjoyed it as much. He enjoyed doing that and had an impact. And so I think that that's one of the things we have to realize. Somebody who's a good researcher isn't the person necessarily to go up front and speak to an audience like this, right? It's not, you don't just shoehorn them into doing something that they don't have the skills to do. But if they have the skills to do that, encourage it, it'll flourish, and you're going to be much more likely to have a team that grows with people who want to come to you, not people who are trying to be part of an organization where you're just trying to shove somebody into each one of those positions. We don't, we're innovative people by and large, people on the conservative side. We believe in entrepreneurship. We believe that top-down regulatory approach doesn't work. We don't believe in central planning. We believe in innovation. Innovation should start with our activism, and activism means giving people the ability to do what they will do best. And you're going to be much more effective that way. So building teams, not empires, I do believe is a really important part. Actually, things like the Olympic Conference are really good for this, because you'll meet a bunch of people who will come to an event like that, and the networking value there is really high. Going and meeting a bunch of other people from Kitsap County, from Mason County, just people you don't, maybe you've heard of them, maybe you see them on Facebook, but you haven't met them before, and that chance to interact with somebody face to face can't be replaced, and that's the way you start to build new networks, new people to work with. You come up with new ideas. Maybe that's just hanging out, having actually a couple drinks with somebody, or those late night discussions, and you discover an idea. And you wouldn't have had that otherwise. So building those teams. Activism will not work without some level of confrontation. When I do a lot of this training, my 3 rules of activism that I came up with after I read Rules for Radicals at Columbia. I read it in 1989, 1990. And I decided, how do I organize to defeat people who believe in Linsky's Rules for Radicals? And so my view was infiltration, confrontation, and punishment. Those are the 3. You can just remember those 3 words. So infiltration was about infiltrating the other side, truly understanding who they are. Don't create a caricature of the left, or of your political opposition, or even your political allies. Really get to know who they are, understand what they believe. That's not always comfortable. Sometimes that means, I say infiltration, sometimes that means sending people to the Democrat Socialist meetings and finding out what they have to say. Sometimes that means going to the Democrat meetings and finding what they have to say. Going to the Republican meetings and finding what they have to say. But what do they really believe? What are the factions? Try to understand them truly, what they really believe. Not the facade and the caricature that you're going to make. Because if you actually understand them, you're going to be much more effective and much more capable of confronting or changing their mind, or perhaps dividing your opponents. But you have to know who they are. Confrontation is exactly that. Nobody is going to want to join a theoretical club that sits around doing nothing, right? Or that debates. Now, some people like, Dead Poets Society. I don't know. You get together, you can read poetry and imagine the world that could be in a libertarian paradise. But it's not going to actually solve anything. If you want to grow, if you want to make a difference, you have to confront. And confrontation is uncomfortable for most people. It can be a lot of fun, but it's actually uncomfortable. Most people don't like to confront. And actually, despite who I am in my position, I don't like confrontations, pointless confrontations. I don't like to have, if I like to be nice to people, I like to treat them well, I like to treat them as I would like to be treated if I was in that position. And so I don't want to have fights with people. I want to have good interaction. But if you're going to be an activist, you have to pick and choose your targets. But there are times to confront. It doesn't mean you have to be a jerk. It doesn't mean you have to be mean. It can be funny. There's all kinds of ways to confront. And remember the example I used of the hunger strike versus the barbecue. That's great confrontation. That's really funny. It was, to a college student, That's hilarious, actually. Especially when the hunger strikers were a bunch of trust fund kids, right? Who everyone knew, who truly had nothing to worry about in life, who felt like they were better than you, and they used their arrogance to confront every student who was coming out of the dining hall and trying to make them feel bad because they weren't joining the hunger strike, right? That's annoying, it's obnoxious. Most students just put their head down and walk on. And when somebody was willing to actually have a barbecue right next to it, I can tell you that our college Republican group at Columbia doubled after that. And it doubled because people want to join other people who are having fun, who are willing to confront, and willing to actually do things. It makes a difference. Now, punishment was my own specialty. Is a third part of that equation, which was, you may not always be able to win, but you can definitely make it miserable for the other side. And so political punishment should always be part of the equation. You know, I knew somebody that used to get beat up when he was a kid at school all the time. He went to school in Georgia, and he said he got beat up every day. And he said he was a really small guy, and he went on the cross country team. And he said all he could do, because he knew he was going to get beat up that day at school, was grab one of their fingers and make sure he tried to break it. That was his whole theory. And he said after a while, it just wasn't fun to beat him up anymore. And so pretty soon he was fine. Nobody wanted to fight him or beat him up anymore because he punished anybody who tried. Couldn't win always, but he punished. You have to make it so miserable that the other side chooses not even to go down that road because they know going down that road is going to produce a result they don't want to have. Right? And so how many times have you heard elected officials get together and say, well, we were considering this proposal, but if we do this, everybody's going to come up, they're going to follow the meeting, we're going to get harassed, it's going to be terrible, let's just not even go down there. How many of you have heard them say that? Because I know I have. I've heard them say it. Every single elected body in this state has had that conversation. Your school board's had it, every single one, a dozen times. Every single city council, park, everybody has had that conversation. I don't want to do that because people are going to come and give us a hard time, or they might come, just the threat of them coming. But you know what? They don't oftentimes say that about people on our side of the equation. They're happy to come and do stuff that are going to generally hurt the cause of liberty or take away some of your freedom because they don't think we're going to show up. So if we do show up and you start showing up, you have no idea, even if you lose on that fight, you have no idea how many other fights you don't even have because they don't want to go down. They don't want to go down that road. They canceled, they killed that idea, they just ended it. And again, future growth is for those who show up. Now, the part for modern activists that I think we've talked about a little bit, I try to live this as much as possible. But I know that people can do it better. It's one of those things, which is sharing the truth and owning a place that you can call your own and promote the truth. The left is absolutely and totally terrified of this. And because this is the doom for socialism and leftism and collectivism in general, is if the truth comes out, if there's actually true freedom of speech, if people are able to have a full discussion of the issues and confront and debate, they lose. And they know they lose over time. More importantly, they fear losing. Even more important than whether they lose or not is they fear losing. And it's why you see this massive effort to restrict and constrain freedom of speech on the internet today by Facebook, by Google, by Twitter, by all the left movement that you see out there right now, by the ACLU of all things, SPLC, right? All these groups, because that is what they fear the most, is that debate and that confrontation. And I remember when I first got involved back into activism in 2011, and I wanted to confront the Thurston County commissioners on this pocket gopher endangered species habitat thing that they were going to shove on us in Thurston County. The first thing I did within 2 weeks of when the Freedom Foundation was crazy enough to hire me and bring me on board, is I put a public offer to have a public debate. I want to debate anybody in Thurston County who will defend any aspect of this policy. The impact on the community, the science, I don't care. You pick and choose and pick your poison and pick your people. We will debate you. We want to have this as public as possible. Let's do 12 debates in the county. Let's go to every school. Let's do it everywhere. Let's confront. And they completely refused. There wasn't a single employee, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, State Fish and Wildlife, Department of Ecology, or any of the planning departments in the county or the cities that wanted to defend that proposal. Supposedly, science was on their side. Supposedly, they had all the experts. Supposedly they knew everything and we were a bunch of clowns, right? But they were terrified of debate. I found out later on that they had these meetings behind the scenes and they said that whatever we do, we cannot debate them on this subject. Whatever we do, we cannot have a debate. That would be horrible. And that was the last thing they wanted. And we continually broadcast that, I remember, for several years. And interestingly enough, we actually gained a lot of allies in that process because people that are free thinkers, people who actually have the ability, they still have this idea that debate's good, and they realize, why is my side, supposedly, why the side I supposedly support, are they afraid of debating? So you find your way to get out there and expose and share the truth. The question is, how do we do that now? Because what's happening is there's still some practical application for how you get that information out. I still believe websites are powerful. If you can set up a website and use that as a way to document and promote and present information, it's one of the most effective ways to get out there and have something online. And it's very hard to take down a website. It's easy to get rid of your Facebook account. It's easy for Twitter to decide you don't have a Twitter handle anymore because you're using a third party to promote your idea. But if you have a website that you actually control and have some skill of putting information up on, that is something that's very difficult to take away. It's not impossible, but it's a lot harder to remove that right now anyway. And I think there's a lot of changes that are coming to social media platforms and other sort of methods of distributing this information coming out there. So if you have a website, that can always be pushed and shared at whatever other platform comes out. How many of you have heard like Jordan Peterson's talk about an alternative to Facebook or an alternative to YouTube or something? I've heard this come out. Yeah, well, whoever, there's a number of different ideas that are out there. I don't know which one's going to be successful, and it won't matter to you which one is if you have a good core base of information on a website. If that's where you're storing your information, your photos, your documents, your stories, your videos, that's something that you have that stays there fairly permanently. Today, maybe Facebook is big, tomorrow maybe some other thing is big, and 10 years from now it'll be a totally different set of vehicles for you to distribute information out. And it won't matter because your core time that you put into it is on a website that hasn't gone away. You've maintained it and it stays there and there's some value to it. And it gives you the ability to create a historical repository of information. I think this matters a lot more than people realize. Because what happens is, I even forget sometimes, I wrote an article 5 years ago that was still out there, somebody read it and they contacted me with a whole new set of information that filled in some blanks that I didn't have then, and I was able to write about it. I had another article that I'd written 2 years ago that somebody that I found out that Forterra was a big land use group that allowed me to write an article about them. And when I wrote that article, because I got all this other information suddenly, boy, were they angry. They never called me, but I mean, they were really mad about being exposed for committing tax fraud and using the land banks as a way to create kind of a scam with government, using your taxpayer dollars to profit themselves. And the ability to write those stories, have them out there, and then be able to build on them over time, I think is pretty powerful. But you can only do that with a website. You do that on just a Facebook page, it disappears. It drops down the feed. Who even remembers what was there 2 weeks ago? So, and then Facebook one day decides to shadow ban, or somebody decides to file a complaint, and it's all gone. So a website at least gives you the ability to hold that up. Now that sounds intimidating, but we need more people to spend some time doing that. And it also costs a little bit of money, not a lot, but a little bit. But it's certainly worth doing. It allows you also to keep that constant pressure over time. Another reason why I might open this up here is, let me see how easy it is for me to get this back up and running here. But I might show a video that I forgot, not the whole thing, but I want to show a couple minutes of a video because that I did recently, and not because it's so great, but because it gives you the idea of an idea of something you can do pretty easily in a short period of time to communicate a lot of information. And if you're able to do this, if we're able to do this on a more regular basis, we have the ability to influence, I think, a lot of people and make a difference in our communities. And I'm wondering if I should just take the time to put this up. So, how many of you want to see the first couple minutes, no more, of this video? Okay. I am going to drop the mic. And you can figure out my password there. All right, let me see if I can pull this up. And so the origins of this video, I was very fortunate. I had somebody who was willing to let me, oh wait, is that on? Okay. Let's see if I can actually find my video here. Sure. So, anyway, so let's wait for the video. I'll wait till this, till you actually get that. Sounds cool though. Oh, you are getting that. Okay. So, local Looks fancy. Hi, I'm GLEN Morgan. Thank you for watching. I'm with We the Govern, and this is the first of what we hope to be a series of videos focused on policy and political issues at the local and the state level, focused primarily in Washington State. Today I'd like to talk about a story out of Thurston County, which is where the state capitol is located. And mainly I want to focus on a $300 million proposed new courthouse project. This is going to be a big tax increase for the people who live in Thurston County. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you're not alone. A recent survey in Thurston County showed that over 63% of the voters here have no idea that this proposal is even being considered. And yet, recently, at an April 30th Thurston County Commissioner meeting held down at the Rochester Middle School, the commissioners voted by a 2-to-1 vote to put on the ballot next April a major tax increase. This is going to be a property tax increase of almost 40% over what you're currently paying today. And theoretically, this money is going to be used to build a new courthouse for Thurston County in downtown Olympia. And here's why I think this is an important issue. Not just because the voters of Thurston County are facing a $300 million tax increase, but the process that brought us to this point appears to be one that was driven by staff and bureaucrats, not by the elected officials. And the challenge that we have is we elect elected officials to make these decisions. And yet when the decisions are basically created by the bureaucrats, for the bureaucrats' own benefit, and the elected officials appear to be along just for the ride, then I think we have a process that's broken down. Now there's other special interests that also have their hands in the pie here and are trying to push this in their own direction. And let's talk about that some more. Now, in order for them to come up with this pretty grandiose scheme, I mean, $300 million project is a big deal. To come up with that, the Thurston County Commissioners last year, 2018, voted and approved 2 different measures that gave over $500,000 to a local architecture company to run through this proposal as part of the plan for this new courthouse. They kind of characterize these as plans, but what they really are is they already know they want to do this. They're just trying to put all the bells and whistles on it and spend your taxpayer dollars so that this isn't a plan anymore, this is actually a proposal, and to make it feel like it's just a done deal. And I think this is a flawed process, and there's a lot of problems. So I'm just going to pause it because you don't need to see the rest of this right now. But I want to point out that here's the value of video. And it's not, the value of the video is the ability to communicate a fairly complex issue in a relatively short period of time in a way that I think is engaging enough that people who may not want to sit down and read, Basquiat's the law, right? Are they willing to look at this and say, oh my God, that's crazy. And then you're also able to provide source documents in the video to communicate that it's not just because GLEN Morgan is a crazy guy out here who just hates all tax increases, even though I do, but because I can actually show that look at how we got here, right? There's $500,000. I'm not just making that up, because what I have found is that staff lies, and that's a surprise. But the bureaucracy will lie constantly, even if you can prove them wrong almost instantly that they're lying. It does help if you keep proving them that they're wrong because they lose their credibility, but it's almost like a pathological requirement to be a senior bureaucrat is to lie. And so the beauty is putting this stuff, this information in there in a fairly rapid fire way. We can actually show the information. There's the cover of the document. Here's the actual agreement that was done. Here's the photo of the commissioners when they took a vote. Here's the picture. I like to name names and put faces to those names. Here's the picture of the senior level bureaucrat who ran this through, et cetera, et cetera. It's a really good way of communicating information. And it's local. It's not about Trump. Nobody cares what I think about Trump. Frankly, nobody cares about what any of us really think about Trump in this room, because we're a teeny little piece of a big puzzle in a state that didn't vote for him. And so, but they do care about this, at least in Thurston County. And this is a big deal. Now, I put this video, there's some screwed up problems with this video that I did originally, and so I just kind of put it up on Friday, mainly because I finally got my YouTube account back from Google. And so this is the first video I had, so I put it up. But it has, if you look at it right now, probably about 4,500 views over a weekend. I put it on a couple Facebook pages, but not a lot. I didn't really get a chance to promote it because I was doing some stuff with the family over the weekend, and Monday it's 4,500 more views. So it is making the rounds, and it's having a big impact. I heard that the county manager, who was prominently featured in the video multiple times, wasn't so happy with me. And the 2 of the 3 commissioners that voted for it aren't happy with me either. The other one who voted against it was very happy. It was made his weekend. But that's effective. True time that I put into this video was about a couple hours. 2 or 3 hours, put this video together. I had a guy that knew how to edit, and so he was able to do the editing. He probably put in twice that amount of time on editing, and there you go. It's up on the internet. It's out running there. In this case, I have free access to a studio and a video guy, and so I don't have to pay. So it actually wasn't much of a cost, out-of-pocket cost, but there's some time. That's effective. And really, we can do this. You get a group together, even half the size, you can find a way to do videos of some kind or another. And there's nothing particularly special. In fact, among many deficiencies in this video, I was wearing a kind of a wrinkled up shirt, and I made the video too long. I mean, there's a couple of problems with this, but nevertheless, it's having an impact. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good enough. If you've got something, start to run with it. You make improvements and learn your lesson and improve. Continuous improvement, right? Always improve as you keep moving ahead. These are great tools, I think, in ways of making an impact. If you have the ability to go to my website too, I'm going to just mention just something else. It is worth using humor to explain what's going on. Now, where I live in Thurston County, my big fight is oftentimes with the Democrat Party in Thurston County. There isn't much of a Republican Party there anyway. So it's the Democrat Party control most of the levers of power, despite the fact that we bounced all their members off the county commission for a time. But they don't really, they hold all the power. And so my confrontation oftentimes is with them. And I wrote an article recently about some stellar leaders in the Democrat Party who I think have really made the biggest difference in bringing them to power. And one of them was, and so the title of it was the cult leader, the witch, and the disbarred attorney, right? Chronicles of Olympia, you know, the secret path to success, the Democrat Party. And I feature these, and disbarred attorneys, and and I put the disbarment documents up here. They stole money from 26 clients, perfect hire for DSHS, and then the convicted felon, for selling drugs in the school zone. That's exactly what we want, And that wasn't enough, so he had to get in trouble for illegal stock fraud a few years later. But he probably still was the best guy with math, in the whole Democrat Party. So I wouldn't have gotten rid of him either. You need somebody that can run math, and anybody that's used to running 2 sets of books as an illegal drug dealer is usually probably pretty mathematically inclined, which is something that they did in their party, right? And then I used a death threat. The Democrat PCO threatened to kill me once, leaving a voicemail from his home phone, which is why he got a no contact order from me, because it was pretty easy to figure out who he was. But these are the people who build their party, right? You can't deny it. And the beauty is, you don't have to say, oh, what a bunch of weirdos, right? You promote them, right? This is great. This is the powerhouse. I don't know if the Republicans will ever be able to top this, but this is who they have to compete with, right? And it's funny. It is funny. It really is. It's funny. I mean, I laugh when I read it. I sometimes, and so people tell me I always read your articles because it makes me laugh. But yet there's I provide all source documents. I don't just make stuff up. It's not accusations. If I say he's a disbarred attorney, I attach the disbarment documents the Supreme Court issued. If I say he's a convicted drug dealer, here it is. Here's the story. If I say he was stock fraud, here's what the SEC said when they sent him his court documents. Whatever it is, right? You don't just make stuff up. You provide it. If he called himself a trans radical witch when he went up to speak at public comment, to this self-identified trans radical witch, I don't have to make that up. The guy says it at every public comment he goes to. He was the chair of their party. I mean, this is leading lights. But you use humor in a way, right? Because I do think if all that we talk about is how horrible and terrible things are, I don't think anybody's encouraged to be involved, in our side. Johnny always likes the fact that I use the term bitter critter. And I keep using that. Nobody wants to be around a bitter critter, right? If I was just up here, woe's me, I'm so depressed, and that's not inspiring anybody. It wouldn't inspire me, And so you want to get out there and actually get engaged, and people are more likely to be involved with somebody or a group of people who are doing things, who are exposing things. Maybe it's not perfect, maybe it's not great, maybe Glenn Morgan's videos are crap, but at least he's getting out there and exposing with something, and nobody else is doing that. And the way the media is going today, it's not like local media is any competition. What's the Olympian doing? They don't even have a building anymore. They don't print their own paper. Their call centers in the Philippines. They moved out of their building. They put some people in little cubicles. I mean, even on my office, the chickens outside is a little bit better work environment than what they have. And so, you know, I'm pretty sure that my website's getting more views than the Olympian is now. So certainly better than their physical circulation. So who are we intimidated by? Right? Look, and I doubt the Kitsap Sun's much better. And so somebody has to be there as your alternative news. And so the only way you're going to get it is if you're the one getting out there delivering it. And you can't assume somebody else is going to do that for you. And the truth is, the collective knowledge and ability and skill set of just the people in this room will greatly exceed skill set and ability at the Kitsap Sun. And so you just simply have to find a way to make it work, right? And a practical, realistic approach. And you don't have to instantly start out 100 miles an hour, you know? You start out with something that you can do, and then you grow from there as you're more successful. And this is a long game. It's not suddenly, instantly over. I do think the television generation, right, which we all are in this room today, to some extent or another, we're influenced by the special on TV that in 2 hours, you know, that's a full movie actually. It really is 30 minutes you save the world, but in 2 hours, somehow, a horrible, terrible problem is coming to this planet, and every problem gets solved in 2 hours. You know, Kung Fu Panda, you can learn an entire skill set that takes a lifetime for most people to learn. You've learned it and you're done. And that is not real life. That is not real life. The abolition of slavery took probably close to 75 years of an active movement to actually get rid of slavery, and a horrible civil war in the end in America to actually do it. Foundation of the Republican Party. Horrible fights. Far worse and far more significant and far more difficult to overcome than anything that we've ever experienced in our lifetime. And yet they were willing to do that. It's a long fight. Generations fought to win. And I think it's something that we have to remember, that the fight that we have today doesn't get resolved tomorrow because I make an amazing video or we have an awesome rally in Olympia, but it is won by building up over time and organizing and learning from our mistakes and becoming more effective. And that is the future of activism for us. It's training others. When I had the award, I'm going to close with this and open this up to questions if that's okay. When Johnny gave me that award, which I was surprised at the Olympic conference. Although it fits my theory with you need to be recognizing people for their accomplishments. I think we have to do that on our side. We don't do it enough. I was quite verklempt. I couldn't actually speak too well. But the only sentence I think I was able to get out was, you know, what we want to do is create more of us. It isn't about Glenn Morgan or we the government, or it's not like you're running a business where you want to dominate the space that you're in, or you want to have less competition so you can monopolize it. It's one thing that's funny about activism, especially on our side. What we really want is I want to have 100 people who could be competing to be up here in front of you today, telling their ideas, explain their ideas. I want to have so many people out there doing this that the options are much greater and there's more of us. We need to encourage and grow more people to do this and help them get organized, help them become effective. We want more of us. That's what our job and goal is to create more. And if we do that, we will win. We can succeed. We can restore liberty in a way that many of us believe it should be here. And if you go back and you read of the fights that they've had in the past, the truth is liberty's been under attack in this nation for hundreds of years. It's not like this is suddenly a fight that showed up today. Maybe we've just recognized a couple things that for us, it just stuck in our craw. But if you read what people were writing in the 1920s or the 1880s, right, or different times in our history, we've been in this fight for a long time. What we have to remember is that it only is won if we show up and we engage and we find innovative and effective ways to do that. So with that, I'm going to close this and open this up for any questions that you might have. That's okay?
A question.
All right, first question.
I live in Kitsap County.
Yes, you do.
We need a new courthouse.
Okay.
And I got an upgrade on my property today, so that means more taxes. And that's down the same road?
I think that every county, every bureaucracy wants to build a Taj Mahal. I think it's in the lizard brain of every bureaucrat. They want to live in a marble palace, and so they're particularly discouraged when they come to work because they do believe that they're a lot smarter and more important than you. And so and they go to work that way. If you've ever been around a bunch of bureaucrats, wait till you hear what they actually say about you when they're just talking amongst themselves. It's actually pretty interesting. So they believe that without them, the world would collapse into anarchy, right? So Therefore, they deserve more pay, more power, more money, and you're just the vehicle to pay for that. And after all, it's only 100 lattes a year for this idea, right? Or how many? They always use a latte example. If you just go into Starbucks for the rest of your life, you'd be able to pay for every single government program that they have. And so the answer to that is that they always are looking for a new building, even if it's something you just built a couple years ago and it's worth, you know, and then they spent hundreds of millions of dollars and they went way over budget. That's just a learning experience. They want to build it again, right? So I think they're always going to try to, if they can get away with it. So school districts the same way. Yep.
If any of you watched Mark Levin's program this weekend, he was actually having a conversation with John Marini, I believe his name is. He's a very, very brilliant professor. And I'm telling you, he said exactly what you said. We have a fourth estate, or a fourth branch of government, which is the bureaucracy, which answers not to the public. They are entrenched in there. You can't vote them out. You have all of these rules and regulations on how they're to be handled, and they're the ones that are dictating policy. And politicians are just the figureheads to pass their stuff. And their goal is to continue to build bureaucracy. There will never be enough money for them.
Well, I didn't know that Mark Levin did that. I'll have to go take a look at that video. But I do believe that. In fact, here's another example. Tomorrow I'm going out to teach a bunch of activists out in Federal Way how to confront their local school district a little bit. And the interesting thing was there, and I used to be a school board member in Rochester, so this is bizarre to me, but despite the fact that state law says the elected school board can set budgets and do all these other things, in Federal Way, the school board has basically surrendered all decision-making almost completely to the superintendent, and that the superintendent even set rules where they can't even talk to anybody outside their school district. They aren't supposed to meet with anybody outside their school district because it implies that their school district doesn't know what's going on. They can't talk to anybody in the public. All the correspondence must be routed through the bureaucracy. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, it just is unbelievable. I don't know why. Well, I do know why, because they just want, just want somebody to rubber stamp whatever the proposal is. And yet, shockingly, 3/4 of the kids that are graduating from the Federal Way School District are functionally illiterate and not able to actually do math, and that's by their own test scores. But they decided to solve this problem by calling every student in the school district a scholar. And I'm sure that will fix everything. Anyway, so this is a common problem. And there's frankly nothing new. There's nothing new that you can tell me about your bureaucracy here, or your bureaucrats here, that I don't think is repeated, frankly, in almost every place in Washington State. And that includes places that supposedly are Republican or conservative, because the bureaucracy exists to perpetuate itself. And the demeanor and the attitude behind it tends to be the same almost everywhere you go. I remember trying to find a city manager when we managed to take over a city where we had really good people elected, and we thought, now's our chance, let's get a good city manager in here. And we finally found one. Now, we couldn't find anybody who was already a manager anywhere else because they were all nightmares. So we had to find one who had just come out of that school and properly trained, and some of the nuances of it, former military guy, and so we thought this would be good. We hired him in, and immediately the first thing the bureaucracy did is found a way to sabotage him and take him out in a scandal within less than 3 months. And that is how they operate. And if you aren't prepared to fight that fight, then that's the path that you're not going to prevail. And so you have to come and approach these challenges with a fairly accurate assessment of exactly the fight you have. The reason why Tim Eyman is hated so much by the left is Tim Eyman has committed the greatest crime against bureaucracy anyone could ever have. He's cut off the taxes. $40 billion. In the last 20 years, Tim Eyman's initiatives, if you actually calculate it out, add it all up, has saved you and I $40 billion. Now that means, that's the way you and I might look at it, but the way the bureaucracy looks at it is that he has hurt them $40 billion of all the grandiose plans and schemes that they could have imposed on the rest of us. And that's why there's nothing they won't do to stop somebody like Tim. Because that's the greatest crime against bureaucracy you can have. Recognizing that that's the obstacle you have. When we deal with politics or political issues, we have to recognize what can we do to undermine and remove or clean out or downsize or do whatever to the bureaucracy so that there's fewer of them, so that we have less to fight, so they have less control, less power. And that is a multifaceted sort of fight. But it's something that just, if we're aware of it, we're more likely to be successful in that process. I'm sorry I went on a long monologue. What's the next question? that really wasn't a question, I was just a comment, but I like it. So, oh, there's got to be more. Yes?
How long ago was it built at that same building?
The current building in Thurston County was built in 1978. And so, interestingly enough, and I do mention this in the video there, I had to go out this. The identical promises that the bureaucracy made in 1978, and they actually made these decisions earlier in 75, the identical promises that they made. Identical, almost, it's almost like somebody took the exact same list of talking points and they just dropped them into 2019. Same thing, identical. More parking, the old building was run down, it was almost identical. There's nothing new, right? It's just the same. And of course, well, you and I might be expected to live in a house that was built in 1965 or 1975, and then all we have to do is just do maintenance and we'll be just fine. The bureaucracy says that, well, come on, you shouldn't expect them to live in a building that was built in the 70s. Come on. And what they do is they stop doing maintenance. And so they stop doing preventative maintenance and basic maintenance of the building. And this is a common ploy in school districts, by the way. And so somehow, because you stop doing all your maintenance, and the building decays a little bit. If you don't paint a building for a decade, it usually looks like it. And so if you don't bother to repair the roof, the funny thing is it does leak. And then what they do is they use the fact that it's fallen apart as justification for why they need a new building. Now, they don't ever argue that they should go back and actually fix the problems of the current building, because that's not so fun. It's just better to throw away the whole building and get a new one. And one of the warnings I gave at the end of this is that all three commissioners that were in office at the time in the 70s voted in favor of the courthouse that was being built now, again, against the will of the people. The citizens in Thurston County didn't want it. They all got voted out of office at the time, all of them did. And now the building was too far along, they couldn't stop it. But and I would predict that the people, if the two that voted for it here would be voted out too, if that were to come up. So anyway, that's just worth pointing out. Robert, am I getting kicked out, Johnny? Am I running out of time?
No, you got time.
Okay.
The coolest thing about that video is for the people that are in Kitsap, take that video that Glenn just did, change the name to South Kitsap School District.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious.
Right.
The whole game that's played over that levy thing, if you watch his video, you simply change the name. I'll bet you cannot say that they didn't do the exact same thing. I went through that thing and went, this is like deja vu. I mean, the whole not doing the maintenance. Anybody remember the pumpkin, the little pumpkin candy holder they put up in the attic and showed it dripping, brought the press in, and then the not doing the maintenance, and the let's put in the new building, but we don't have the maintenance money for the new building, and hey, we don't have the staff to actually run the new high school. There is no operating budget to run all this stuff. If you watch this video, it is a mirror image of South Kitsap School District. And I would encourage you to actually listen.
Yeah, and I think that, if you look at it, you will see that these stories are repeated over and over again. Names change, and other little things might change, but the actual problems that you run into haven't changed much. So the value in me doing this, my opinion anyway, isn't so much that I'm trying to have an impact in Thurston. I am, and I want people to know in Thurston County what's going on. Really what I'm trying to do with a lot of these is inspire other people to say, boy, Glenn is terrible at these videos. I can do it better. And I'll do an even better one out here about what's happening in Federal Way, right, or what's happening somewhere else. And you're just more likely, and here's the other thing, videos that you put up, if you manage them well, right, they last for years. Years and years and years. And so you're able to have influence with that video. I have videos that I put up about Pacific County or about Clark County from years ago, and they're still relevant and useful and helpful. And so the nice thing is it's always there. You keep coming back to it, and not just you, but somebody else. And people are always looking at these videos. I see their accounts continue to go up. And I can look on Google Analytics, as long as Google will let me have access to it, and I can see that there's people who are looking at them. And when I look at most of the people traffic to my website, it's close to about 92%, 93% Washington State residents are going to my website looking at articles. So I've had about 550,000 views on the articles on my website over the last couple of years. So those are mostly Washington States, and some of them are probably repeat visitors. But there's an impact there. There is an impact. It adds up over time. Now, maybe it's just people looking at the article to yell at me or say what a jerk I am. But nevertheless, they're popping up. Yes?
What
talking about school board in general.
Okay.
There's a couple of good candidates in our South Kitsap School District that probably aren't going to have a whole lot of chance of getting in there, but we're going to work on it, you know.
Sure.
But it seems to me, and I'm helping one of them, that it's the WEA that's wagging the dog.
Sure they are.
in South Kitsap. They're so powerful. That's Washington Education Association, and they're so powerful. The union. They're so powerful. They had a perfectly good high school principal resign. They
Right.
had an office meeting and they said, "You're out, or else we're going to fire you." And so she's out. She resigned. But she resigned because they promised her she'd never work as an administrator in any school in the United States.
Right.
That's how powerful the WEA is. And that's why all schools look similar. Because the union is wagging the dog here.
Well, and so it's unions, it's other things, you know, but the thing is that I think for us to be most effective, sorry, I'm not going to start this all over again. But, I was going to look at something else, but I couldn't get on. So, there's special interests in almost every element of government, one way or the other. And so, unions, it could be contract, you know, the homeless stuff. Anybody ever looks at the homeless, which really, it's a drug addiction problem being disguised as a homeless problem, mostly, in most jurisdictions in Washington State. And people are wondering, why are they pushing all this? Well, look at how much money is actually going out to these programs, and look at the recipients of those funds. And I can tell you, because I've been to a lot of the meetings, and people need to be going to these meetings, so you need to know what's going on, is that the people who are pushing these solutions or getting the grants have absolutely no goal of solving anything. Their primary objective is to make it worse, because that's the only way you get more money. And I'm recruited to write con statements on homeless tax increases at Olympia, because the other people that would oppose it, they don't get invited to wine and cheese clubs afterwards if they write the statement. And since I'm never going to be invited anyway, I got to write all the statements, and then I got to go argue against it. And just a couple years ago, I wrote the one in Olympia against the homeless tax increase, and it was the last week that the Olympian still had a newspaper office. And so the editorial board actually had both sides come and present. I was presenting on one side, and then the recipients and the mayor, the Olympian, everybody was on the other side. And one of the things I pointed out then, and I wish I'd emphasized this even more, but I feel pretty, you know, it's always great to prophecy, you know, be accurate in what you say. I said, no matter what happens if this tax is passed, homelessness in Olympia, the way we're defining it, these homeless, you know, the camps on, will only get worse. It won't get better, it'll only get worse. And then, no, it'll get better. It won't go away, but it'll get better. And the recipient, the guy who's getting all the money from these grants, the $1.5 million he was going to get that year, and he just keeps millions after year, he was adamant, he was angry, no, there's no way, this is going to help a lot. And what I didn't realize is how significantly worse it would get. Within 6 months, they pass the tax, these guys get the money, and next thing you know, the homeless population downtown exploded, and they had camps everywhere, and you know, they put out the dumpsters, but nobody wanted to use them. They just wanted to dump the garbage on the streets, because after all, if you're a drug addict, who cares? And you know, I'm not even going to walk 20 feet to the dumpsters. It's easier to throw a pile out, because you know you'll get somebody to pick it up, and that's great, because that's another grant. And everybody gets money, and the only people who lose are the people who live there and pay taxes, right? Which isn't in any way in the camps. And so it's amazing how predictable some of this stuff is. And it's just rinse, wash, repeat. Rinse, wash, repeat. That's all they do. Nothing's changed. There's nothing new in the sun. They've been doing this stuff for decades. It might be an environmental issue. It might be, it could be a Chamber of Commerce project. It could be all kinds of things. But it's the same thing over and over again. And it's the cycle that has to be broken, I think. Yes, sir.
In connecting with the homeless situation.
Yeah.
I own a travel trailer, and to get a life pad, they now have a fee, RV removal fee, and basically all well, that's a good idea. All these abandoned RVs.
Right.
But really, most of them are meth labs.
Right.
So they're toxic waste.
Right.
Yes, it's considered a toxic waste
Yeah.
area.
You better do it, right? And so there are a lot of classes. They have some online. They have stuff where you can go and look at them that way.
Yeah.
But if you want to learn how to, you can go to a community college. You know, they always say though, those who can't do teach.
What I want is a disruptor video.
Yeah.
I want somebody that just wants to be disruptive.
Okay, so you want to make so to make more effective videos. So I'll just tell you that there's a couple of basic rules. I think that don't let the perfect be the enemy of good enough. That's number one. Because when you first start out making videos, they won't be perfect. And everyone here in this room is a video critic. You are. We all are. And so, and you're not going to produce a video that you would like to produce. It'll never be good enough. So you want to produce a video that you have the skills and capability to produce. So shorter is better. My video is too long. It's 19 minutes. That was a screw up. I meant to have 12 minutes, and it had gotten too long for a couple of reasons. And I just, rather than edit it down, I just went with it. Talking head alone, and that's been really common on the internet lately with YouTube, where it's just a talking head, person speaking. You better have a high level of skill and entertainment value in order to pull that off. I don't think that's easy to pull off. And so I don't think I'm good enough to do that. So what I do is I try to add stuff into it. Talking from a teleprompter always looks wooden. I've never found a good way to do that without looking like you're doing it. And so I don't do it. I have scripts that I try to roughly follow, and it's hard to stay concise, but trying to keep it concise is important. And if you're going to make it higher production, where you're inserting stuff into it, take however long it takes for you to produce that video times 3 is probably a more realistic assessment of the time commitment you're going to have in it. But there's so many more tools now, even if you're not that technically savvy, that can work to do things to make it look better. So I wouldn't be intimidated by that so much anymore. A lot of that's going away. But find somebody in your group. You'll always be able to find someone, and maybe you pay them a little bit to do editing. You can record stuff and give it to them and do editing. I could do a whole class on what I've learned and all the mistakes I make, because I made a whole bunch of them. Yeah, I could. And I don't mind doing that. I've done that before. When I found those, most people want to take the class, and nobody wants to produce the videos. And so I don't quite know where that disconnect is, and I don't know if it's the way I teach or whether this looks too intimidating. For instance, this intro looks really fancy here, right? I kind of think it's neat, but it looks fancy. It's a template. It's a template. It's just so it costs nothing. It's a free template actually, and all I insert is a copyright free or something that I don't have to pay a copyright on for the sound, which sounds cool, and all these little images. Just this image, these images, it adds a level of interest. And so when you see this, this looks like I know what I'm doing, kind of, but all this is templated. I dropped some photos of my website on. I spent about 5 minutes putting this together. Not because I knew what I was doing, and then if you look at it, you do the same thing at the end. So, slightly different music today and other subjects. Don't forget to subscribe, and feel free to share those with others if you like what you read. Until then, I look forward to seeing you next time. So it looks cool, right? Not that part, that's a little hard to do, but this part right here, again, so about 5 minutes I spent on that. The only thing I really did different is change the sound, so I could have something a little different at the end. I mean, really, it wasn't super complicated. It does help that I have a guy that knows what he's doing, and so that does make a difference. I'm going to hand it over here. I'm done, but I'll hand it over to you.
How many of you know what product placement is in a movie? You know what that is? Yep. And so, product placement for Glenn's next movie. Right there. Okay. There we go. If we don't see that, we're going to miss that.
Something like this, right?
Okay, you can take 3. Okay, we're running a little behind schedule, but this has been a good meeting, and we had a great turnout. About 35 people on a summer night when people are, reading and going to the beach and going on vacation. So I'm really thankful and impressed. Don't forget, please, to take a look at your donation envelope that's on a seat near you. And are there any last-minute announcements that must be made?
I have a question.
Oh, yes?
Is anybody having a party tomorrow night for the Orlando rally? How is
I don't even know what that is.
that? For Trump. Trump.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. I don't live in Orlando.
I'll come to yours.
So apparently not. Probably on a channel, on a cable channel near you.
There might be a couple of reasons. Yeah, there are a few going on.
There are a few of them going on. Kenny has holding one, and Pierce County Republicans are holding one, and there's another one in Kitsap.
Okay, all
Tomorrow
right.
at 5 p.m. I
I have no idea.
Jump on the Facebook and look at the Kitsap Republican Party, look at the Comaros.
Okay, Comaro's Tea Party page and the Pierce County Republican Party page, my house information. So, I had another, what date is the picnic?
The second.
Who said that? Who said that? You get a gold star and everything else. So I go to that. August 2nd, Silverdale Waterfront Park, looking for volunteers. And thank you for being here. God bless, drive safe. Good night.